Hi everyone, my name is Sergio Shankerman and this is my creative critical reflection. It is here where I will talk about each aspect of my film, including writing, research, production, and editing. I will be answering four main questions along this podcast, which are how does my product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? How does my product engage with audiences, and how would it be distributed as a real media text? How did my production skills develop throughout this project? And how did I integrate technologies including software, hardware, and online in this project? Let's begin with the first question. How does my product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? To answer this, we must first identify what the conventions are. I found early in my research that although each movie would begin in a different way, they all followed some of the main conventions regarding techniques and themes used. Most thrillers, which is my film genre, the thriller genre, have main protagonist in a conflict with the main antagonist. Normally, the protagonist is pictured as the hero of the film that is trying to defeat the evil antagonist. The objective of a filmmaker in a conventional drama thriller is to create tension between this antagonist and the protagonist. Directors usually do this through some techniques including tension music, quick cuts, low-key lighting, and diegetic breathing sounds. Also, the characters in a thriller are usually relatable characters and participate in relatable storylines. As if a story that has an unrealistic plot, the audience may not be as scared because they think it's unrelatable. Now let's look at my film. I believe my film used some of the conventions, but not all of them. For example, my film did start by alluding to the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist. Even though I never show the antagonist of the film, it's established that there is one. As far as the techniques go, my cuts were not that quick. The only time where I used some of the quick cuts was when the creature in the forest attacked the main characters. I did, however, add some breathing sounds when I cut to the point of view of the creature in the forest. I thought this made the film much scarier as the breathing was very deep. This, coupled with the hue added to the image put forth in the cutscene, adds a more authentic and fearful look. When it comes to representing social groups, the only social group that was represented in my film were the youthful children. Out of all the social groups, children were definitely the most innocent. This is the reason why I chose these youthful actors. An older actor might have had the wisdom not to go into the abandoned forest. However, the kids, especially in their preteen and teenagers, think that they are invincible, and that's why they dare to go on in the forest. The next question is, how does my product engage with audiences, and how would it be distributed as a real media text? One of my focuses early on was an emergent feel for the audience. I did this mainly through two ways. The first was through relatable characters. Everyone has once made a daring decision as a child, and a lot of most people like dogs. The fact that I was able to combine these two things in my film makes the decision to go into the abandoned forest for the safety of their dog a relatable one for most audiences. This leads into the second way in which I was able to engage the audience, which was through the fear aspect of the movie. The fact that the audiences care about these characters makes the audience care more when they are in danger, and thus makes them more scared. As far as how I would distribute it as a real media text, since I would be starting out as a very unknown filmmaker and making an independent film, the best option would be to enter this in a film festival and distribute it that way. If this was not the case, and this was a well-funded project with big-name actors, the best option would be to go the conventional route and distribute it through movie theaters and a normal release. After a couple months, the decision would be to either stream it with the use of websites such as Netflix, or to release it through digital download and DVDs available on the website for the movie. Currently, DVDs are becoming less and less popular by the second, so I would choose a route of streaming the film because that way it gives more people a chance to see this film, and therefore getting my name out for a possible next film and a career as a filmmaker. The next question: how did my production skills develop throughout this project? Throughout this project, especially in filming, I had to overanalyze every decision, and considering my genre and theme, I had a wealth of options of shots and angles to diversify every scene. For example, I made the decision to shoot from behind a tree when shooting from the point of view of the creature. I did this to emphasize the main characters were being watched by someone that was not easily being seen. Another example would be when I was filming, would be the camera moving in circles around Nick after he regains consciousness and he's calling out his brother's name. I did this mainly because I wanted to emphasize how Nick was completely alone at the time in the forest and he was surrounded only by nature. I also did this kind of shot because it was kind of cool. These are the types of decisions that went into every shot that I took when filming this part of the project. In the editing side of this, I truly had many options. One of the main decisions I made was in the editing aspect was regarding sound. I didn't want to add music because my main emphasis of this movie was fear and immersion. I wanted the audience to feel the fear these two characters felt. So I felt that having nothing but the silence and the forest noises were the best way to do that. The other major editing decision I made was to add the special hue to the point of view of the shot of the creature. This helped distinguish that it was not just a regular shot and it was the point of view of the creature. I got this idea from a peer in the early process of researching from this film and gathering with other filmmakers in my class. The next question I'm going to answer to this project is how did I integrate technologies including software, hardware, and online in this project? Let's start with software. For editing, I used Movie Maker, available for Windows. Prior to editing this film, I had very little experience with editing films as a whole and none with Movie Maker. The little experience I had edited with iMovie for Mac computers. That being said, I had to learn a lot about the project while editing this film. I think that the program is very simple. It's made for simple collages and not really made for large scale films. When comparing it to iMovie, I think that iMovie goes much more in depth and gives the user much more options when making their film. If I had to do this project again, I would undoubtedly use iMovie. One thing that upset me was for Movie Maker that it didn't allow me to overlay two different sounds that didn't come with the video. For example, I could not overlay the heavy breathing noises with the noises that came from the forest as they didn't come with the video. But having said all that, it was a very simple program and it was easy to use, and other than that, I had no major problems with it. Now let's talk about hardware. I used a camera that comes with my iPhone 6s. I had already had experience with this camera and I knew it filmed in high resolution. I thought it was just fine and therefore I saw no need to buy another camera. However, one problem that I found with this were shots where I had to move. For example, with the shots filming in circles around Nick. I found it difficult to keep the camera stable considering that the phone is very small and the terrain in the forest was not the steadiest. However, for most of the standing shots, I had a small tripod that was able to help me in setting the camera. Now let's talk about online. The biggest use of the online resources in this film was adding the selective sounds to my film. When I first started editing, I found that some of the background noises were really annoying and I didn't like them at all. For example, even though I shot inside a forest, the forest noises that are naturally in it didn't come up in the video. So what I decided to do was to get them from online. I got them from a website called soundbible.com that it provided copyright-free sounds, and while I was looking, I found a sound that would have been perfect for the scene of attack, and the sound was titled Godzilla Roar. And I ended up using just the two sounds, the forest sounds and the Godzilla sounds. Other than that, I used online for mainly researching purposes. These purposes including title name ideas, how to display the credits, among other things. Lastly, here, I want to talk about some of the key moments in this film. When I first started preparing for this film, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted it to be about. I definitely wanted it to be about something that I liked. Otherwise, making this film would not have been an enjoyable process. First, I thought sports, specifically soccer or basketball, since those are the sports that I'm passionate about. The reason I initially hesitated on this was, even though I like sports, I feel like I wanted to diversify myself and try something new. I would feel like I would be challenging myself if I did something else. So I held off on sports for quite a while. So you may ask yourself, how did I go from sports to a thrill about a creature in a forest? Well, what was happening was that I was feeling kind of homesick at the time. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and I was starting to miss my family and my culture. Then I thought, why don't I make this about family? I didn't want to make a film that was all mushy and targeted for mainly girls, since I don't really like those movies at all. So I thought I'd make a movie about a pair of brothers. I felt like this theme was very heartwarming, but it also fit into the type of genre that I like. In the research stage, I found that I learned about the thriller genre and how to film it. The film I most took after was the movie Jaws, for mainly two reasons. The first was that Jaws was a very successful movie in its genre. It was one of the most successful for that generation. Secondly, because of the impact it had on people. I constantly heard my parents say how it took them a while to get into the water after they saw Jaws, because this movie scared them so much. It had that type of impact on them. I really felt like this was the model I had to follow to make a successful film in this genre. When it came to production, I was surprised at the amount of time I spent contemplating every shot. I wanted to shoot every shot in the best way, and this meant that taking all the options into consideration. The editing part of this whole process was the one that I enjoyed the most, really. It was like solving a huge puzzle. I had the pieces in front of me, now I had to create the image. Although this part was the one that caused the most stress for me due to the time it took, I enjoyed it because I saw it come all together. With this comes the end of my creative critical reflection. I thank you for watching my film and for listening to me right now, and goodbye.